Greetings. Welcome to another edition of Conversations at BankBeat. This is Tom Bengtson. I'm the publisher of BankBeat magazine and BankBeat.biz, the website. We're really fortunate today to have as our guest Andy Schornack. Andy is the president of Security Bank and Trust, based in Glencoe, Minnesota, several offices throughout the region. Welcome and thank you for being here.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
You bet. And I know that you have a really interesting personal story as your career developed. BankBeat magazine actually selected you as one of our rising stars in banking all the way back in 2016. We told the story a little bit back then, but why don't you take us from your earliest thoughts about becoming a banker and how you got to where you are today?
If you start back in 2005, I started as an intern in the industry. Obviously a different market environment than even we are in today. And, went right into a crisis, and as I look at it, what a fertile learning experience. I started at a bank, First Commercial Bank, that ended up failing in 2012, which was a very interesting experience. So I spent a lot of my early career on workouts and working through challenges of the industry, which really led into my experience at Flagship Bank, which invested in 2013 and continued to grow and build. And really through those, we've done a number of acquisitions, both at Flagship Bank and now Security Bank and Trust Company. We merged the two here in April. Is that you see all the different industry dynamics. We've had a lot of change, through the challenges of the great financial crisis to low interest rates for, several years to now the last 12 months having interest rates move higher, really the last 24 months where we've seen a lot of movement there. The dynamics over that whole career so far has been very interesting.
Well, I appreciate that you're using words like interesting and a learning experience. This is a very positive way to view all of this. So obviously you've got a positive nature. But it is an interesting time. You came in when things were pretty hot, 06, 07, and then of course financial crash in 08. Then we've got a recession for about 3-4 years. I mean, it's a real roller coaster ride.
Yeah.
And so obviously you've drawn a lot from that experience.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, when you look at banking is a very nuanced business. It's a very simple business. When you look at it, we take deposits and we make loans and we try to make a spread, right? And the spread needs to cover our overhead and our potential losses. And so, look at it, it's like that. That's not complicated. But then you look into actually how do you manage your balance sheet? Asset liability management, and that's changed a ton. Obviously in the last few years, it's been really big. But if you go back to, even through 06 to 07, 08, when rates just cratered from 8.25 down to nothing, and now we're back at 8.5%. You've seen a lot of volatility in how to manage not only, your loan credit quality and structure, but also your deposit structure. What makes more sense to have non-maturity deposits versus certificates of deposit. The interest in that has changed a lot over time with interest rates. People for a while there, certificates of deposits were not really an offering people were interested in. And if you look across the industry over the last 12 months, it's been one of the fastest growing markets as people look for yield and certainty. So it's been a great experience in following all of that over the last several years.
Right, and you've experienced a lot of growth throughout all of this time. I mean, I think you're over $800 million now as an organization.
$1.1 billion, yeah.
$1.1 billion. Okay, well then I've got to. That's substantial growth from when you got into the bank at 2013 in that time frame.
$90 million.
Yeah, so that is just really quite a thing. How do you, what are some of the challenges you have to deal with when you have that kind of growth?
Well, we've got two really strong organizations we merged in April. And when you look at, the growth, the key to it all, in my opinion, is really kind of focusing on core relationships and building those communities and those tribes within your organization that support growth and that you can support as an organization as you grow with them and around them. a bank is really a derivative of the client base it has. We're not creating businesses. We're not creating, their success. They're creating their success, and we're able to help enable them and help them grow. And that's been our job, is to make sure we're building those relationships, supporting it with great technology, and that might be from our farmers, out west and in McLeod County, and where we're really strong, to our small and medium-sized business entrepreneurs that we have in Twin Cities. I mean, we have 21 branches in and around Minnesota, so you've got quite the spectrum of businesses and individuals that we're trying to serve. And so we want to make sure that, on a core level, we're building, good relationship-based services.
Yeah. I think I heard you give a speech and you described yourself as a small to medium-sized business entrepreneur enabler.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
thought, now I like that, right? Succinct. I mean, kind of a mouthful, but still pretty succinct. Unpack that a little bit for us.
Well, I believe that, for our country and our state to really succeed, is that we have to encourage and enable more small to medium-sized companies to succeed. I also believe that we're in a generational change. So the demographics are changing in our state, in our country. Millennials are the largest portion of the workforce. Baby boomers, are starting to retire. Generation Z, in terms of number base, is slightly behind it. But we haven't been, as a country and as an industry, encouraging younger people to take on leadership roles and take on those small business acquisitions and to grow their companies and provide the resources so that they know there's other people doing it, and providing that access to say, hey, you're not alone. There's lots of people growing and building successful small businesses, and come be a part of a tribe or a community that is helping these individuals succeed. And that's what we've been trying to do, and that's what I've been trying to do. I'm very active on X or Twitter, LinkedIn. I've got a great community of people not only here in the Twin Cities but nationwide. I was down in Texas on a Minnesota Bankers event, and I met with a few people that I've met through Twitter over lunch and coffee, and you just talk. Everybody has the same challenges, the same struggles, and my job is to, I'm not helping a Texas business expand, but I can provide advice and guidance about what financing options are out there and maybe what consideration should have. That doesn't change from Minnesota to Texas.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the social media, which I think is really interesting, because some bank presidents are active on social media, but probably not that many, really. Yeah. And yet you've really taken to it. And I mean, if anyone who follows you, I mean, sees you got a lot to say.
Yeah. Well, I think it's an important component of what we do today.
Yeah.
Is being an enabler and a supporter, is you got to be visible and vocal. And that goes not only in our community, but again, with millennials and Gen Z coming up, where they spend their time and space is different from where baby boomers spend their time and space. It's a matter of being visible in all. As a community bank, we're not just banking one demographic or one tribe, in terms of interests. We're trying to meet a variable group of needs, and a lot of people spend their time and attention on X, on Twitter, on social media. Everybody's got their vice.
Yeah.
In terms of which one of those,
sure,
is where they spend their time and interest. And so it's important to be out there and be visible and share how people are handling their banking, financial needs, being a resource, trying to provide, guidance on where people can go to get good information.
Yeah. And your franchise has offices in both urban areas and more rural areas, more sparsely populated areas. And you talked earlier about entrepreneurship and kind of whether or not people are drawn to that. What is your observation? My sense is sometimes I worry that the entrepreneurial spirit is dwindling a bit. Are you seeing that, or I hope maybe you're seeing something different?
I'm trying to encourage it.
Okay.
So from my platform and my goal as an entrepreneur enabler is really to try to encourage more people to feel they need to actually, that the risk is worth it.
Yeah.
And I think we've built a system and an educational system to some extent that has encouraged less risk taking, not more risk taking. Mm-hmm. and that not understanding what the fruits are after the risk is taken, and understanding how it can be managed, and how it can be controlled, and trying to encourage more people to understand that component. Because once you lift the veil and say, here's some success stories, here's some great things that entrepreneurs that look like you, that feel like you, that came with the same background as you, are succeeding in, then it makes it less daunting to go out and do. And I think we aren't lifting the veil enough to say, hey, people are getting it done. And then that'll encourage more entrepreneurship. And as you get more rural, I grew up in rural Minnesota, town of Perm. When I grew up, it was around 2,000 people. It's larger today, but I have a large extended family, and almost all of them owned a small business of some sort. And it wasn't because it was almost out of necessity to some extent. You start a company because you're good at something. You've got a skill, a technical skill, an opportunity, and so you started companies. And you still see that in rural America today. I'd like to see more people in the metro, stand up and carry the flag and build their companies, and have a bank that they know is going to be in their corner to help them do so. I think gives them reassurance that they can get it done.
Yeah, I'm sure that's right. Let me just call, I want to go back to your own personal career, and I was going to ask about sort of the migration of the brand from Flagship Bank to Security Bank and Trust, but I know actually there were two separate banks. You were in the leadership of both the banks at the same time, highly unusual.
Yeah.
But maybe let's talk a little bit about that experience, and then again about the shift in the branding.
Yeah, I mean, it is unusual. And as I've mentioned to others in the past, there's not too often where you're president of one bank and CEO of the other while they're both operating and both have separate holding companies and the like over a number of years. So in 2019, January 2019, I became president of Security Bank and Trust Company while still being CEO of Flagship Bank. And then we merged the holding companies at the end of last year, and then merged the banks in April of this year. Branding, changing branding in a bank is hard. Generational activity, Security Bank and Trust started in 1935. It's family owned since then. The Hazy families was part of their initial starting, and still a very big part of it today. And so that's been a great experience. And then when we brought Flagship in, it's a different brand. It's a different component. It was primarily metro-based versus, Security Bank had really started in Chaska and moved out on 212, so, kind of more of a rural-based core. So as we brought the banks together under the Security Bank and Trust name, you've got kind of that legacy history and that community of the family that started it and kind of had built it over many decades. And you've got multi-generational clients, and we've got a trust department as well that's around $500 million in assets in and of itself, that are outside the bank assets. And that, provides that resource. So now our overall metro to rural markets, have that trust, that wealth management, that overall, bank support. And it's a big decision when you change a name. And, we're still going through that process. We're just 60 days into the merger. So, reintroducing to, some of our markets and our people, that change, it takes time.
Okay.
And it's a process. We've updated our website. We've had some, making sure that, people are in terms of, our sponsorships and our advertisements that we're being engaged. We're up in Cambridge, the Isanti Parade and Rodeo this past week, and handing out all of the new swag and gear and having, exciting time there. But it takes time.
I'll bet it does. Yeah, I can imagine what a big job that is. This past June, you were installed as president of as chairman of the Minnesota Bankers Association. Tell us a little bit about that. It's a big commitment. You've got to be willing to go in the chairs, and then it's a multi-year commitment, and then now this year you're chairman, and I know you've kind of got a message that you're promoting. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, what helps with the Minnesota Bankers Association, they got a great team there. Joe Witt and his team run a really good organization. I'm proud and glad to be a part of it. And exciting to be able to go through the chairs. Vice chair last year, chair this year, and I'll be immediate past chair the following year. And my goal for the organization, and really my goal and involvement, has to do a lot with what we've already talked about, but also working on kind of 4 pillars of areas in terms of financial literacy, affordable housing, fraud prevention, and really talking about the green energy impacts that our banks are already making in Minnesota. There's been a lot of questions coming from the political environment on what we're doing in these areas, and each bank across Minnesota, independent to publicly traded, have been making huge strides in combating a lot of these items, but sometimes that just isn't heard. Mm-hmm. And so my goal, for our organization as chair is to get that message out there a little bit more loudly and broadly. And I think we can do that, and I think we've got a great team that can help communicate that. I've been fortunate to see our own bank, be involved in a number of these areas and continuing to evolve, in how we can handle and tackle these. Yeah. So it's been pretty exciting. And I think it's super exciting to be in a state that has so many banks in so many areas of the state that are still independent and doing these activities in their communities. I think that's unique as well. And so, it's a great experience.
Sure. Well, I know over the past several decades, as I've followed the Minnesota Bankers Association, this theme of telling your story comes up, fairly regularly. And what is it about bankers, do you think, that they need to be reminded of that so frequently? I mean, there's almost like bankers are a little bit shy. I mean, I know a lot of them, and I know they're not shy. But when it comes to actually describing the impact they have on their communities, sometimes people are a little too humble. What do you make of that?
Well, some of it's Minnesota nature.
Okay.
Right?
Sure,
I mean, that's ingrained in our culture a little bit in our state. A lot of it has to do with privacy, concerns, competitive concerns. If you're out there telling every deal you did, you're opening up your client base to potential competition from a number of fronts these days, right? Competition is not just other banks; it's other credit unions, it's online banks. There's all kinds of fintechs, that are getting into our space, and I think we can do a better job of it. I do agree; it does come up over history. You can read, magazines we were just talking about going back even to the early 1900s, late 1800s. A lot of the stories today still ring true. There's a lot of lessons in that history that we can use and build. I think it comes back to just, it's kind of that secrecy. We don't want to share too much. And some of it, a lot of times I say at our bank is, just ask our client, are they interested? Are they okay if we share this information? I don't see a lot of pushback from our customers because a lot of times we're spotlighting them. We're spotlighting what they're doing, the impact they're doing, the great works they're doing, not only in their businesses, but maybe in their community. And that's appreciated because, sometimes our platforms are larger than their small business or medium-sized company's platform, and or two together is better than one alone.
And at the convention, you shared kind of a cool project that your bank was involved in, a library in one of the towns you serve. Yep. Tell us about that one.
Yeah, so we financed the construction of the Howard Lake new library that should be opening here in the coming months. I was just out there this last month looking at the finished product. It's the state's first net zero library. Yeah. So, it's got a positive impact on the climate, but also, it's a great update. If you've been to Howard Lake and you've looked at their old library and then you go look at their new library, you can be amazed at the impact. And it was a process. Adam Burkholz, who's our lender in Winsted. He was also the city manager previous to that in Winsted, so he's got great public finance experience. Talked with them, set it, worked together, USDA and a number of other financing options, worked through this process. And we were able to really help them, bring a dream come true, or a dream forward of what they wanted to do in their community. And it was a process, and it worked out. And some of our experience in municipal lending, we do a ton of direct municipal lending to our communities, as well as deposit gathering has allowed us to really, support our cities as they're looking to grow their communities and as their communities grow, to improve ideas and.
Yeah. Well, I really applaud you for for you to encourage your colleagues to share their stories, because local stories can be very compelling, and I think that you can't go wrong promoting those kinds of stories. But of course, as MBA president, you kind of look at things from an industry-wide perspective. There's industry trends and issues that affect everybody in the industry, and you advocate on those. What are maybe the top 2 or 3 priorities that you'll be working on industry-wide in the coming year?
Well, that'd be a better question for Joe.
Okay, fair enough, of course. And I know the MBA is active in all kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, from my personal standpoint, I think, this continues, working on kind of regulations and what is prudent regulation versus over-regulation. There's a lot of, regulations that require a ton of paper pushing but don't actually help the small and medium-sized business. When you look at some of the new regulations that are coming forward, obviously there's a lot of industry pushback on, creating rules that maybe weren't there off of rules that have been there. And so I think from an industry standpoint, we're really focused on, finding good regulation. We all understand that we provide services off of FDIC insured deposits. And that requires regulation to make sure that we're operating in a safe and sound manner, and I'm happy to do so. I have a great partnership with all of our regulators at Security Bank and Trust. And so, we're just saying is that sometimes too much regulation stifles the economy, stifles our client base, impacts our customers' ability to get access to credit and information. And so we want to make sure that those decisions are made with a kind of a broader lens than just responding to maybe the wind of the day.
Sure. Well, that's a powerful message, and I know the MBA always does a great job advocating for the bank. So we're going to bring this to a close here as our time has run out. Actually, I can't believe how fast time goes. But this is I really appreciate the conversation. I think you have a very interesting organization, Security Bank and Trust, and I've enjoyed following it for the past few years, and I know that there's probably many more interesting things down the road, and I'll continue to keep an eye on it.
Well, I appreciate you having me, Tom.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate all of you spending some time with us for this conversation. We look forward to seeing you again next time when we have another conversation with BankBeat.